Hi, my name is Dr. Chaya Lieba Kobernick, and I'm going to be talking about DBT today. So I'm excited to be here with you. I wanted to just start by explaining what DBT is in a general sense, and then I'm going to go into the specific questions that people sent in. So just to start off with, DBT is a type of therapy. It stands for dialectical behavior therapy. So it's a type of behavior therapy, which means that we're going to look at how behaviors are impacting how you feel in order to change your life and make things better. It's under the umbrella. So this answers one of the questions that was sent in is what's the difference between CBT and DBT? CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy, and similar to what I just explained, cognitive behavioral therapy looks at how thoughts and behaviors impact how we feel in order to change our lives. So when we're struggling with anything with mental health, that would be the way that CBT works, is by targeting thoughts and behaviors. So DBT is from the like under the umbrella of CBT treatments. So it's going to use a lot of CBT principles in order to make this treatment work. So we're going to look at thoughts and behaviors also in DBT. The nuance to DBT, right away in the title, is dialectics. So, like I said, it stands for dialectical behavior therapy. So dialectics is a philosophy, an ancient philosophy that has several different parts to it. The most important of which for you to know is the idea that there's always multiple truths, that the world is not black and white, and that we need to exist in a world that is gray. With constant things that seem to contradict each other, and seemingly don't make sense together. For example, I love my mom and I hate my mom. Both could be true. Therapy could be really helpful and it could be really uncomfortable. Medication can be useful for me and it can also give me lots of side effects. Those are some of the first ones that pop to my mind when I give this kind of an explanation. The most important dialectic or fundamental dialectic in DBT is the idea of acceptance and change. At any given point, I accept my clients exactly as they are, while at the same time striving to help them change. And I expect that from my clients, that they are accepting themselves exactly as they are in this moment, while at the same time working towards change. And everything in DBT is connected to this this paradigm or this basis. So there's I'm working on acceptance and I'm working towards change in every single thing that I'm doing. In every single thing that I'm doing, I'm working on acceptance and change. Every single skill that I'm introducing in DBT comes from this basic foundation, and every principle that the therapists are using has this basic foundation there of acceptance and change. Okay, so that's my basic background on just the title of DBT. DBT has 4 different modes of treatment delivery within the treatment model. So you might think of a typical therapy involving individual therapy. DBT has individual therapy, although it's a very specific type of individual therapy or a specific principles to how we're going to be doing that individual therapy. There's also skills group where we learn skills, and I'll talk about that. There's also phone coaching. And there's also consultation team for the therapist. And that's an important part of DBT also, is that the DBT therapists are part of a consultation team. Also, as part of individual therapy, very often there's family therapy or parenting work as appropriate. To talk a little bit more about skills group, I think DBT is very often known for as the DBT skills. And DBT skills are an important part of treatment, but as I just explained, they're only one part of the treatment model. And if it doesn't have all 4 parts that I just mentioned, it's not full or adherent or actual DBT. It might be DBT informed, or it might be parts of DBT, but it's not full DBT, the treatment as it was designed. So the skills group usually will teach, or most adherent DBT groups will teach 4 sets of skills. And the 4 sets of skills are mindfulness, distress tolerance, interpersonal effectiveness, and emotion regulation. And like I mentioned before, right, everything in DBT is balanced between acceptance and change. Right. Sorry, I saw a question come in, so I want to make sure to address all the questions that come in. But I do want to finish this thought first. So everything in DBT is balanced between acceptance and change. So our skills are also balanced this way. Mindfulness and distress tolerance are acceptance-based skills, and emotion regulation and interpersonal effectiveness are change-based skills. So, and somebody asked, how do dialectics help with emotion regulation? So the dialectics is like kind of like a foundational principle that's guiding everything. So it's going to show up throughout the whole treatment model. We're going to be talking about dialectics, but really the principle, so it's not that it's going to directly help you manage your emotions. However, the principle is that we're constantly living in a world of gray, that things are never black and white. And if things are constantly gray, things are not black and white, then it's going to keep me, hopefully that's going to be my work towards not getting stuck in extremes of thinking or in black and white ways of thinking, but help me to live more flexibly. And that's going to massively impact my ability to manage my emotions. Okay. So we talked about skills group. Another thing I want to mention in terms of skills group is that people often ask, can't we just learn it individually? And I'll say you could theoretically learn it individually. You could even learn it from a book. There's a lot to be said for learning it in a group, and that's why it was designed this way. When you're in individual therapy, what tends to happen, particularly for people who tend to come to DBT, is that there tends to be a crisis of the week. And so individual therapy ends up getting subsumed by this crisis of the week. And then new learning doesn't happen. Which makes sense. That's not as a blame. That's just a reality, is that there's just tends to be real crises that need to be dealt with week after week or session after session. Doesn't have to be weekly. And unfortunately, then new skills never get learned. So if we understand that people who are coming to DBT really often do need to learn some skills, as do most of us in the world, then we want to make sure that those skills get learned. And so skills group prioritizes learn skills. And so as one of the skills co-leaders, my job is teach skills, versus when I'm in an individual DBT session, that's not my priority. My priority in my individual sessions is there's a set of priorities, but for most people I'll explain this also. But for stage 1 DBT clients, my hierarchy, what I'm following, what's guiding my session is life interfering behavior, number 1, because you got to be alive in order to get good therapy. Number 2 is going to be therapy interfering behavior, because you got to get therapy in order to get better, is our assumption. If we've gotten to this point, we're assuming that. And then target number 3 on this hierarchy of what we're prioritizing in the session is quality of life interfering behavior. Which is what people are often hoping to prioritize, but we're going to have those other priorities first. And that's going to kind of guide the session. So that's my priority in individual sessions versus in skills group. The goal is teach skills. So, and then phone coaching is kind of the way of bridging those two to bring it into reality. So I'm learning the skills in skills group. I'm connecting it to the patterns in my life that aren't working in my individual sessions. And then in my actual day-to-day life, I call my therapist up in the moment when I am not sure how to manage, or I don't know how to be skillful, or I want to do things differently and I'm not sure how, and I'm trying and it's not working, and I'm calling my therapist and we're implementing it in the moment, and that's super, super powerful. So that is the basic backdrop of. I do want to explain. The basic overview of what is DBT. One other thing I want to explain is that DBT is also organized in different stages. People typically think of DBT as stage 1 treatment, but I'll explain what the different stages are. So first, there's stage 0, and we like to think of this as like a house of treatment. If you Google it, you'll see a few images that explain it really nicely. The house of DBT treatment basically is that people come and they're literally in the basement, totally in hell. Not for all, but for some people with suicidality as a way of life. but really living in emotional chaos. And they might feel like they're literally living in an emotional hell. And in the basement or in stage 0, our whole focus is on orientation and commitment. I have to orient you to what DBT is about because it's a massive commitment. DBT is a big treatment, like I just explained, all those different modes of treatment. So that's a lot. And I want to make sure that you understand all that before we're jumping in and that you're able to really commit. And so we're also going to work on commitment because lots of people come in and they aren't ready to commit yet. And so we're in stage 0, getting you on board and getting you to commit to doing this full treatment, which can be really a lot. So that's stage 0. Then in stage 1, which is like the first floor, where we're still in like behavioral chaos or discontrol. In stage 1, that's what people typically think of as DBT, where we're doing skills group. We are identifying things that we want to change in order to reach our life worth living, which is our major goal in DBT. And we're working, like I said, on those different those different targets on our hierarchy. We're working on life-threatening behavior, therapy interfering behavior, and quality of life interfering behavior. Once we're out of behavioral discontrol, we climb to stage 2, to the second level of the house, and there's usually a disconnect from our emotions. Maybe we're not in behavioral discontrol anymore, but we still aren't able to actually fully experience our emotions. Maybe we have a history of trauma, or maybe we've just grown up chronically hearing the message that we don't make sense, our emotions don't make sense, and we don't trust our emotions very much, and so we're not able to fully experience them. And so in stage 2, we're going to do trauma work and emotional processing emotional experiencing. And then in stages 3 and 4, we're really looking for problems in daily living. That's typically like your average depression, anxiety, what kind of a career do I want, relationships, things like that. And then stage 4 is peak spiritual experiencing. So not everybody sticks around for stage 4 in therapy, and very often people do stage 0, stage 1, and stage 2 is pretty common. So I want to address some of the other questions that came in. We talked about how DBT is different from CBT a little bit. Let me go into a little bit more. So I said CBT is thoughts and behaviors and how they impact how you feel. And DBT is kind of is under the umbrella of CBT treatments. There are many different types of CBT treatments, and standard or traditional CBT is, like I explained, it's going to look at thoughts and look at behaviors in order to impact how you feel. And DBT is a much more nuanced and specific approach. Particularly, DBT is very well suited for people with where the core problem is emotion dysregulation. So that can show up a lot of different ways. That's not necessarily tied to one particular diagnosis. And it's not necessarily tied to one particular diagnosis, but definitely that core problem of emotion dysregulation is usually running throughout whatever problems are showing up. The next question that was asked is, how does DBT help someone with intense suicidal ideation and borderline personality disorder? And does it truly work? And have you seen clients actually get better? So that's actually what really keeps me going, is that I have had many clients graduate from DBT. And I think one thing that makes it so rewarding is that you see people really, really struggling and really move to a completely different place. And that is so rewarding to get to be a part of. So that I think that's what keeps a lot of DBT therapists going, definitely myself. And I do feel very privileged to have worked with people who have really done that work. In terms of how does it work, like why does it work? So there's two different pieces here. There's suicidal ideation and borderline personality disorder. I'll address them separately. Suicidal ideation. So first of all, what we're going to be doing in every single session in the beginning is, if suicidal ideation is present, is we're going to be looking at, hey, when did that suicidal ideation show up this week? Showed up yesterday? Okay, good. Let's look at that. With no judgment that it's good or bad or that it's dangerous. I mean, obviously it could be dangerous and we have to deal with that also. But assuming that it's showing up on a regular basis, not in a dangerous way, it just as part of your daily life and daily experience or regular experience, let's look at it, understand what are the thoughts that are coming before it? What are the situations coming before it? What are the emotions coming before it? What situations are happening after? What's kind of making this show up in your life? For many people, suicidal ideation is kind of a way of mentally having some kind of escape from immense pain. If I'm in immense emotional pain, I am going to want it to stop. That's very logical. If I'm in physical pain, I also want it to stop. And what do many people do if they're in physical pain? They get painkillers or they distract themselves, right? We don't want to be in pain and confronting the pain and feeling the pain all the way. That is very, very hard. So the same thing when I'm in immense emotional pain is I'm going to want to make it stop. And how do I do that? I do that by, I could do that in many ways. And some people will eat a carton of ice cream and some people will yell at their loved ones. And some people will think about ways that they cannot be around because I want this pain to stop. And so if we can understand how that shows up and we can start dealing with the problems, then we're much more likely to be able to actually deal with this and to instead of our brains going automatically to suicidality, we'll be able to go other places. So that's in terms of addressing suicidal ideation. Borderline personality disorder is a collection of several different symptoms. In the DSM, there's 9 different criteria, and a person has to have at least 5 of those in order to qualify for that diagnosis. And so that is addressed in many different ways. There's many different parts to it. But what I see, not myself, DBT sees people with borderline personality disorder, that the core problem is a problem of emotion dysregulation, though there are newer models and that are honored in the DBT world talking about the interpersonal aspects. And both of those are addressed in DBT. I would say particularly through several different ways. Number one, we are teaching emotion regulation skills. We're also teaching mindfulness skills in order to notice emotions as they climb so that we're not just 0, 100, 0, 100, but we can notice 50s and 40s and 72s, and we can do more in those places. We're also learning distress tolerance skills so we can handle the 100s because they're going to continue happening. So we can handle the 100s without making life worse. And we're learning interpersonal effectiveness skills. We're also having phone coaching that's helping us apply this in the moment. And that's also helping us learn how to interpersonally deal with a therapist who we're needing help from or who we're asking for help from, and learning how to negotiate that relationship can also be extremely impactful. And then we're also learning about our particular patterns. We're learning about how that shows up in our lives, and we're adjusting that through several different therapeutic mechanisms. Sorry, I'm just getting a little bit technical, but through cognitive modification, exposure, learning skills, several different therapeutic modes of treatment are being used in individual therapy in order to help achieve change. So DBT can be particularly helpful in dealing with suicidality and borderline personality disorder, but like I explained before, particularly helpful for anybody with a problem with emotion dysregulation and not necessarily any one particular problem or one particular diagnosis is necessary. More of that core problem. Somebody asked, what if DBT isn't working? And so I like to first ask what that means. What does it mean not working? And then I would want to understand more. So actually, for example, somebody just sent in, why don't all DBT therapists do phone coaching? Mine didn't because she wants me to be more independent. So like I said this all the way in the beginning, that if you're not, if the therapist is not doing all 4 modes of treatment, it's not DBT. And this is, people get a little picky about that, but I think it's really important to say that because it can be great DBT informed therapy, and that can be fantastic and be very helpful for people. But if it's not working, then we might want to ask, do we need full DBT? So for example, the person who sent in this question, you might want to ask yourself, is DBT working for me? And if not, if is DBT informed treatment working for me? And if not, then I want to make sure that I can get the full treatment, because if that's what I need, then there's a reason that was part of the why that is part of the treatment. And it serves, it's very, very important. I think many therapists don't do phone coaching. I don't know your particular therapist, but many therapists don't do phone coaching because it can feel intimidating and can, It's one of therapists' biggest fears in doing DBT, and therefore the DBT community of therapists and researchers have done lots of research on DBT therapy and on phone coaching in particular, and have found that phone coaching does not typically lead to the kind of problems that therapists are afraid of. So that can be part of it. Yeah. So there are more questions coming in, but I want to make sure we address the original questions first. So yeah. So if DBT is not working, first question is, what do we mean not working? What does that mean? And see if we can address that issue. Second of all, am I getting full DBT, and do I need full DBT? If I need full DBT and I'm getting DBT informed therapy, maybe we should try out full DBT. And then if any part is not working, then, well, great news. We're considering ourselves, within a behavioral therapy lens, we're considering ourselves scientists. This is new data. If something's not working, it's new data. And so we're going to adjust accordingly, with the highest priority being to get good treatment in order to get, to reach our actual goals. The main goal of DBT is to achieve a life worth living. And so we're always prioritizing what's the most effective way to get to that. Why would a DBT therapist remove phone coaching as a punishment for poor conduct? I don't think any DBT therapist would remove phone coaching as a punishment. I think that it depends on, phone coaching serves a very particular function. And so if phone coaching is not serving that function, then it's not about phone coaching as a privilege. It's about phone coaching serving a function of therapy. Same thing with any of the modes of treatment. They're not privileges. This isn't, it's not like, getting like an ice cream cone or getting like a ticket to the fair. It's not a privilege. It's part of treatment. So it's meant to serve a function in order to help you reach your goals. And if it's not working to help you reach your goals, then it is not effective. It's not serving its function. So we want to make sure that treatment is actually doing what it's supposed to do. The last question we got over here is, when should I consider switching to DBT from IFS? That's a great question. The first thing I would ask is it working? And I would give therapy a fair shot. If there's a reason why why I approached this therapist, why I reached out for this therapist, and why this therapist believed that IFS would be like the most effective treatment for that person, I wouldn't switch to a different treatment mode until I gave that a sufficient try and made sure that was really working or not working for me to reach my goal. And then if I've tried IFS and it hasn't helped me reach my goals, then I might consider switching to another treatment modality. If I'm in IFS and it's not helping me reach my goals, and I want to decide, is DBT the right treatment approach for me? I would want to see do I think that the core problem is emotion dysregulation? And if it is, then DBT is probably a fair bet. The other piece I wanted to bring up, especially in terms of this question of who needs DBT, is something I usually explain in stage 0 of DBT, which is who benefits from DBT. And I explained it so far as emotion dysregulation, but where does emotion dysregulation come from? So the theory behind DBT and why we're using this treatment model, how do we get to this treatment model, is because of the biosocial theory. That's the theory underpinning the treatment. And the biosocial theory is as follows. There's a bio part and a social part, creative name. And the bio part is that some people are born more biologically, emotionally intense than other people. There's nothing wrong with that, and lots of people are born more biologically, emotionally intense and live fantastic, wonderful lives without emotion dysregulation. They're just more emotionally sensitive. They'll pick up on more. They'll be more intuitive about other people. They're more compassionate, usually creative, empathic, able to understand people and read people really well. So that's a biological emotional intensity, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. People who are more biologically emotionally sensitive, I like to think of it just like being more biologically sensitive to hearing, and then it's going to be easier for you to pick up on nuances in music, or being more biologically sensitive to taste, then you're able to pick up on more nuances in taste and flavor. And people who are more biologically, emotionally sensitive are just going to pick up on more. Nothing inherently wrong with that. However, many people who are born more biologically, emotionally sensitive will end up growing up in an environment that might be chronically invalidating. And invalidation can look anything like severe trauma and abuse and neglect. It can. And it could also look like the most the most supportive, adoring, invested environments possible. This includes both primary family, but also peers, school, community, etc. And when the environment is basically consistently sending a message of you don't make sense, then that is going to lead to this emotion dysregulation that we talked about. And that's going to set a person up for several different problems that could end up looking lots of different ways. But for many people, it does end up looking like suicidality or borderline personality disorder. It doesn't have to look that way. And what invalidation looks like or means is this consistent message of you don't make sense. So, for example, if I'm crying and I'm very, very sad, there's nothing wrong with that emotion. Any emotion that we feel is totally makes sense, and there's a reason I'm feeling that way. But if my environment is like, hey, why are you so upset? It's way too intense for the situation, or it doesn't make sense to us, we can't read that, then we're going to consistently send that message of, hey, stop it, chill out, what's your problem, relax. And that messaging is going to kind of tell me to shut down. And okay, so I might be able to do that. I might be able to turn it off and go to a 0, but eventually that emotion is going to explode. And when I explode, I tend to get the reaction that I was needing in the first place, which was my sadness was calling. I wanted support, or I needed emotional support from my loved ones. And maybe when I exploded at 100, I was able to get that more effectively. So if it works, then at 100, I'm getting what I need. Then yeah, I'm going to learn over time to suppress at 0, 0, 0, and then explode at 100. And so we're not spending a lot of time emotionally regulated. We're either like numbed out or at 100, and that's not super helpful. And so over time, this can lead to problems with emotion dysregulation. Like I explained, that can look a lot of different ways. And so a lot of different types of people can benefit from DBT, but that's usually at the core issue. So I hope that this answered a lot of different questions about DBT and gave a pretty broad overview of what DBT is. It is a complex and nuanced treatment model. Many people don't need DBT. I would say it's a pretty intensive treatment. Like I said, there's a lot of different parts to it. And so it can be an intense treatment model, and that's okay. And that's fantastic, actually, for the people who need it. And people who don't need it, it can be overkill, and we don't need that much. So for people who need DBT, it can totally save a person's life, and absolutely help people achieve their goals for treatment. Thank you for joining.